and we like to welcome you today, or tonight, I should say, to our panel titled, Where is the Project Sponsor? We have a distinguished panelist with us here today, and it gives me
Recording in progress.
to welcome them to PMI KSA chapter webinars program. I do appreciate the gentlemen taking their time, despite their busy schedule, to join us here today. Starting with Dr. Saadi. He's been a great supporter for the chapter. Dr. Saadi Arda is the CEO of Advisors Management Consultancy Group. And to me, he's beyond introduction and been a great asset, such a dedicated professional that's one to support project management in the region.
Thank you, my friend.
We also have with us Ross Garland, who is the president of the Project Program and Portfolio Governance Qualification Authority. Such an important figure in the project management world. We also have with us Americo Pinto, and I'm trying to make sure I pronounce the name right and not make any mistakes. Americo, you're there with us?
Americo is just waiting for the link, and Ricardo needs to allow to use his camera, please.
Okay. Americo is a leader in our project management world, and also Ricardo is with us, I hope, right?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. My camera is just off here. I think, the host to allow me to open my camera. Okay, but it's a pleasure to be participating in this webinar and joining all of you on this discussion.
Well, we certainly see your lovely picture here, Ricardo.
Thank you. But you will see me very soon. As soon as it's allowed, I'm joining.
I hope so. With this simple,
here I am. Okay.
I understand there was a late flight, late luggage, huh?
Yes, I arrived, I think 2 minutes ago here in my office, but I'm here. Yeah.
There we go. Agile project management. Dr. Saadi, shall I turn it over to you now, please?
Okay, I think just Americo is waiting for the link. If we can make sure he receives the link, because if I start, I cannot communicate with him.
Okay. We'll give it a minute.
Okay. Did our team initiate the link for Americo?
Yes, I asked him, and Abdul Majid is with us. He heard us. Yeah, he said he sent it. Yes, he said he sent it. Americo Pinto.
What I did, Saadi, I just sent him a link to my link. I don't know if it will work, but I sent him the link I used. Let's see if it will work.
Okay. Okay.
I'll forward Dr. Saadi the email we sent. Maybe there's just to double check there are no mistakes.
Okay. So, if you like, we can start. Again, I'm very happy to be here today with several of the thought leaders of our domain. I'm very sorry that Engineer Badr Borshed has something extremely urgent. He will not be able to join us tonight. Antonio will be able to join us, but he will be a little bit delayed, around half an hour. And I would like to welcome again Ricardo, Tawan Abu Abdurrahman, and our guest also tonight, last minute, Ross Garland. He's the president of P3G Qualification Authority, and was invited because of the relevance of his experience. I'd also like to welcome Americo, who's just joining in. I hope they give him the access to the camera as well. Now, our topic today is about the project sponsor. about sponsorship, which is very important. And just to have a quick kickoff, what I'm going to do is make a less than 5-minute, very quick story. And this story is about it's about sponsorship. It's
We're
called-
receiving a welcoming message. Seems like the panelists are well known in our area. A lot of greetings. Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, we see it takes two to tango.
Okay. So, in addition to all our esteemed thought leaders, I decided to invite today two more, three more actually, panelists with us, and to tell the story about It Takes Two to Tango quickly. And we have here with us Jad, he's the director, and Sam, who is the project manager, and Farid, who is the senior project manager, if you like. And the story starts by Jad assigning Sam as a project manager. Apparently, Jad is our sponsor today, and Sam is the project manager. And like all project managers on the first day, everybody's happy and looking forward to an amazing project with lots of success. And Jad starts with preparing a charter. But the charter is cuff handling, okay? It tells Sam what he needs to produce, what he needs to provide, but it does not empower Sam with the needed resources. Now, Sam is puzzled, and what happens after that? Inevitably, the project is delayed, and many issues occur. And when things go that bad, what happens? Okay, we blame the project manager because he was not able to deliver. But now Jad, as a sponsor, he has a project and he needs to deliver, so he is looking for the next victim. And he hears about this senior project manager who's Farid. Now, Farid, on the first day, he thinks, why did they kick off the guy who was before me? And he starts his assessment and investigate. And of course, Jad is providing the same cuff handling project charter, but Farid says no. It's stupid to utilize the same instrument that got us to fail last time. We need to reconsider things. So he put certain requirements. He asked that we need to define your role, Mr. Jad, as a sponsor to support the project and to support me as a project manager. And we need to agree, number two, on the delegation of authority. What can I do? What is the limit of what I cannot do as a project manager? And then we need to work on capacity building for all, including educating the sponsor himself. You see, in many cases, we teach project managers everywhere, everything, but the ones who actually have the authority, the sponsors, they need a lot of knowledge. Now, he agreed, Jad, okay, not happily, to Farid's term. And what happens? When you have proper sponsorship, delegation, good capacity building, you succeed. They succeed together, they collaborate, and they make success. Because sponsorship and collaboration, they make success. And this is the end of our story. So I'm gonna stop sharing and start with our discussion tonight.
Great start. Let's start.
Okay. So our first angle is to identify the difference between a sponsor and a project manager in terms of accountability, power, authority, influence. And I would like to start with somebody who was smiling all the time. So Ricardo, can we start with you, please?
Hello, everyone. It's a true pleasure to be with all of you. You know, I have Saudi Arabia in my heart. And, you know, it's always great to see Saudi, Americo, and Ross, and to participate in this discussion. And I think truly, many times we underestimate how relevant is the sponsor to the success of a project and to the success of everything we do. We many times we believe that having a sponsor with, I would say, a good name and a good position is more than enough for us to undertake and to deliver the project. But that, in reality, what we see is that we need a sponsor that is not only able to help us to leverage and implement our projects, but it's someone that is very close to us in terms of providing support, enabling our relationship with stakeholders, removing, I would say, the roadblocks between what do we intend to do and what is the reality we face. And I think that Afonso Bucero, that is a great colleague on PMI, he wrote a book about project sponsorship. And it's a super nice book talking about how relevant, and many times we always think that, oh, it's so relevant to set up the right project team, to set up and identify the right project manager. But we don't think too much about the relevance of the sponsor. I'm sure that all of you, including the panelists, will have cases where a project is started to derail when you lost your sponsor or they changed the sponsors. And this is a critical success factor, to have the right type of sponsorship. So for those who are attending this, it's critically important that when you are sponsoring a project, it's not just a paper or a signing authority or participating in a monthly meeting to check the status and ask questions. No, it's to really, at the senior level, to help things to happen. So I'm super happy when Sadi invited us to discuss this topic, because many times we just don't give the right priority to thinking about when we are in the role of a sponsor and when we are in the role of a project manager, and we need to have the right sponsorship to the project. So I think these are my initial remarks, Sadi, and back to you.
Thank you, Ricardo. So capitalizing on this, I'd like to ask our friend Muhammad Hamad. You've worked in Aramco for most of your life, then Jacobs, then right now you are focusing on PMI KSA. And in terms of sponsorship, okay, what about the sponsor? What can you tell us about things that a sponsor can do that are essential, but the project manager cannot?
Okay, so let me just make a couple of comments. The number one is really identifying the right sponsor, because often enough we think that it's the project management part of the company. Companies will have a project director, they'll have a VP of projects, or even a senior VP of project management and engineering. Well, this still is not the best sponsor for any project, because really they are only on the service providing side of the projects, of the organization. You need a more powerful sponsor that typically should be in the client operations side, and these are the more powerful people. Now, and I'll give you an example, something that happened, one of the projects we had back in the 90s, mid-90s, Sheba project. This is a 500,000 barrels gas oil separating plant. Technically, it's not very complicated, but it's in the middle of the desert, Sheba Desert, in Rub' al Khali. The sponsor for that project, and I was not at an executive level or even management level to get close to it, but we all knew the sponsor for that project was the CEO of the company at the time. He was behind it. And he basically, as Americo said, he removed all the roadblocks because organizations are busy. We got our engineering contracts done just like that. not the usual waterfall process. And then the engineering was done on time, 6 months. So I don't want to take too much, but I'm saying really get a big gun. If you have a $10 billion, $20 billion job, get a big gun behind it to start removing these roadblocks. Otherwise, the poor project manager is not going to do a good job. And make sure you select the right guy from operations side. They have much more authority to do that because this is his own plan at the end of the day. Back to you.
Excellent point. Now, my question would go to Americo. Americo, what if our friend Muhammad Hamad said, get the big gun? How many big guns do we have? Do we have big guns for all of our projects? Number one. Two, what if you are the poor project manager? You are Sam, okay? And you don't have a big gun as what happens in that case?
Very, very good question. Well, first of all, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to be with you today. Well, actually, when we talk about sponsorship, everyone today here, I'm sure that for us, it's very clear what a sponsor should be. But the point is, it's very common, even in big companies, that we find in the executive level, people that are really good in the business, but it doesn't mean that they are prepared to be sponsors. Actually, many of them don't know exactly what to be a sponsor really means. And it means that they don't say that because, you know, they are the executives, they are supposed to know about it. But the reality is that many people have no clear idea about how they should behave as a sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something very interesting from the point of view of a project manager that is recognizing that as a risk. It's a real risk. So actually, sometimes someone can be assigned to be your sponsor, a top level executive, for example, but it doesn't mean that it will work because sometimes this person just don't know exactly what is expected from him or her, and he will never tell you that clearly, right? So that's the most important point for me today, in my point of view, is how can we prepare our executives to become real sponsors, because many of them have no idea about what is expected in the real life, you know, in terms of actual measures and actions, you know. So we need to think about the maturity of our sponsors, not only about the maturity of our project managers and our organization, but I believe we should give a little more attention to this group of people because, of course, they are absolutely important to the success of our projects.
So, Americo, let me quickly ask you, whose job is to educate the sponsor?
That's a very good question. In my work today, I work for a community of PMOs. I believe that the PMO could do that in a very great way. Actually, in the last 2 years, for example, I've been working with a group of 15 PMO leaders in something quite interesting. This work is almost completed. Is the first maturity model for sponsors. It's something totally different. We are not talking about managing projects, but being a sponsor. And that's something interesting because we can connect the maturity of our sponsors with the complexity of our projects and create a model, a process for that. So if I have, for example, a project level 1, you know, top complexity, I should have a sponsor level 1. And if I don't have it, there is a big risk. And as a project manager, I should manage that. So that's something that I believe that we can, you know, it can make us think about these gaps, you know, and the PMO can take care of this. I have no doubt about that. But of course, project managers can do this role too. It's possible.
Americo and Mohammed, let me just add one point. I think also this I would say training and preparation of the sponsor should be also part of any institutional leadership program. So, for example, every single company, when they have their leaders, they have an executive program that prepare the future leaders of the organization. And project sponsorship is a key aspect of this. I just want to add this because I think this is becoming also a very big trend, I would say, in terms of preparing future sponsors for projects.
Yeah, totally true.
Correct.
And just to close my thought, Ricardo said something important, because usually project managers are studying about project sponsorship. How can we upgrade this discussion? You know, it should be discussed in the top level of the organizations, because they are the sponsors. So that's the big challenge.
Okay, I think you all raised very beautiful points, and we are coming to a good picture here. Though we come to this challenge, which is, I think, one of the questions. I'm going to take questions in a while, not now. But one of the questions is very relevant, because they are asking whether a project director can choose a sponsor. It's the other way around. The sponsor chooses the project manager. You don't choose your boss. Okay. And this is part of the problem. So I'm gonna get all what we discussed and put in the hands of Ross. Okay. So where are we with respect to choosing a good sponsor, and what are, yeah, I'm gonna ask next the traits of a good sponsor, but right now, how can we select a good sponsor, and what if we don't have the authority to select the sponsor? What do we do? I think you are muted, Ross.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you for inviting me to this, Saadi. I really appreciate that. Look, there's been some really interesting points raised here, and I just wanted to cover off on two of them. At the very beginning, you asked a question that I thought was absolutely key to good governance, which is, what is the accountability of the project sponsor versus the accountability of the project manager? Now, that's absolutely critical, isn't it? Because if there's a lack of clarity around that, then we know what happens. The project manager will keep pushing all decisions up. And if the project manager doesn't know what their accountability is, they could end up pushing decisions up as well. So we need clarity around who makes what decisions. Now, what I would say is that the project sponsor is accountable for the success of the project. It's on them, to the extent that if the project manager is not doing their job and the project looks like not being a success, that is still the project sponsor's accountability, because they get rid of that project sponsor and they bring in somebody who does know what they're doing. So they're accountable for the success of the project. So the question is, what then is the accountability of the project manager? Well, ideally, that project sponsor will have described their project in a business case. And so the project manager then delivers that project within the constraints that are laid down in that business case. So within the constraints of budget, of schedule, time, interdependencies, all the main parameters that help describe that project, the project manager operates within those. And if ever they need to change any of those parameters, that's when they have to go to the project sponsor. So to me, sorry,
the owner of the business case is the sponsor or the project manager in this case?
The sponsor. If you think about it, and this comes directly on to the second question, which is how to choose the right project sponsor. And we've heard two sides of it, both of which are absolutely critical. The first is, and I think it was Mohammed made this point, that they should come not from the delivery side of the business, but from the business side of the business. They should be a core business person. In
Absolutely.
fact, sorry, Mohammed.
I said absolutely. Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, they should come from the business side, because you want the business to be at the core of decision making associated with the project, because after all, it's the business that is going to inherit the outcomes that that project delivers. But then, of course, you get the other side of the equation. What if the project sponsor doesn't have the capacity or the knowledge or the technical expertise to act in that role? So the question is, which is the most important factor? Do you choose the right person because of where they sit in the organization? Or do you choose the right person based upon their knowledge and experience and technical expertise and so forth? And in my opinion, it should be the former. It's where they sit in the business, because they'll be inheriting that project. So it's where they sit in the business that determines how you select them. Then the question is, how do you support them if they don't have the technical expertise, if they don't have experience as a project sponsor, and so forth? And that's a big question. It involves training. It involves supporting them perhaps with people on the project board who do have those sorts of experience. But yeah, so I'd head down that path personally. Now, the point you made was, Saadi, was it the how to select the project sponsor? Was that the point?
Yes.
Yeah, so in that respect, I think what you're looking for, if you think about it, when a project is delivered, it will deliver certain outcomes. Meanwhile, you've got a business person there who is going to inherit those outcomes, and they're accountable for delivering their own outcomes in the business. That's why they got the job, yeah? So what we want to make sure of is that the outcomes the project delivers are exactly the outcomes that the business needs. And the only way to make sure they're identical is if the owner of the business is also made the project sponsor, the owner of the project. And that way you can be assured that the decision-making is aligned, because it's the same person making the decisions. Now, that doesn't mean they're not supported on a board by delivery expertise and user expertise. Everyone's nodding their head. Yeah, all these important people who will support them. But to me, that is how you determine who should be that project sponsor. And it ends up meaning that the business is at the heart of decision-making.
Okay, very good point. It actually reminds me.
Exactly. If I can make a comment here,
Sure,
it's really
sure.
could be in the business side. If it's an IT project, so get a strong leader from the IT to drive. For one thing, beginning with the scope, because usually business people want to take forever to draw the scope of what they want. What is it they want to build? Which technology they're going to use, and they go on and go on and go on. So, and the project manager cannot control that, because they tell, hey, this is a business case for us. We need to make sure we select the right technology, to select the right content, the best location. Well, then you need a big gun, like I said earlier, in the business side, in the IT or in the downstream or the upstream, and say, enough, guys. Make up your mind, what is the scope of the project?
Or alternatively, Mohammed, the big gun can just say, you, pointing at the project sponsor, are accountable for the success of this project. If you're behind schedule or you go over budget, it's your neck that's on the block.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of making them accountable. Because otherwise the CEO becomes the project sponsor for all projects, and that doesn't work.
That will be the day when operations are accountable for the project delivery. In my word, that's not there yet. It's
Okay.
it's still the PMT organization who suffer.
Yeah.
No, I believe Ross raised a very important point by adding a dimension which is beautiful about the managing of benefits and the sustainability of the business, and on getting to the bottom line of what is required from the project to add or to change within the organization. So starting with the end in mind, as my friend Stephen Jenner talks about it in his Managing Benefit, and going from there, if the sponsor comes from the business side, business sector, even he will have the needed budget and authority because the project is going to change or enhance or grow the business. And then he will assign a project manager from delivery side who is capable of delivery according to the needs of operation, which is the client in this case of the project, which is going to utilize the deliveries in order to realize the benefits they are looking for. So in this regard, let me go back to Ricardo, okay, before we move to another point, because I love the way the discussion is going. What do you think, Ricardo, if we don't have a sponsor who is qualified enough, but let's say he or she, they have the authority which is needed, and they are taking care of the business side, what can we do in this respect?
Yeah, I think also, of course, this is a quite sensitive point, but what I would do if I was in this situation is that you need first to improve the best you can your relationship with your sponsor and take the opportunity to help also him or her to succeed. You know, it's something like, it's not just you take the ball as a project manager and throw the ball on the side of the sponsor and say, now it's his problem. No, but try to work in a partnership, like a team with different roles, different, I would say, authorities and different aspects of work, but working together. It's not something like, okay, I have a sponsor that could see things in a different way, and you need to work hard to make him or her to see on that way, to educate. You know, I worked in many projects where I didn't have, I would say, the perfect sponsor. So what you need to do, you need to use everything you have to support, because, you know, it's like when we think that things are different. No, the project and the success of the project, for example, what Ross just said is incredible. The sponsor is accountable to. Is accountable to and must feel accountable to. So you cannot take the CEO and say, okay, every single project that Aramco is doing, for example, the CEO is accountable. Of course, the CEO is the final responsible for the company, but you need to have pockets of accountability into different projects. So the sponsor needs to feel that and needs also to look for help on that. It's not just throw on the project manager or the other side.
Beautiful. Excellent. Okay. Shall we move to another point, or maybe I'll take some questions before we move to another point? Because
another little story here.
Yes, I love stories, you know.
That's something I've learned. I come from old school where actually sometimes the proponent was never really involved in the project. That was in the early times, and of course that was not the best practice. But I remember a project where we started off in the early stage, and we were called in for a special meeting, me, the program director, and the operation director. There is an assigned operation director assigned to me. That's something mature organization realized, that to have a good project, assign a project team and an operation team to live the project with them. But before, it used to be the project team is 100% responsible for everything: the cost, the schedule, the quality, the safety. And the project sponsor, or the operation team is waiting for it to happen. He's there, he's living along with you, but he's not accountable as strong. But in that project, Aramco started to learn. And they called us into a special meeting, the senior VPs of project management and the senior VP of the operation side. And they looked at us, and both of us had the first name of Muhammad. And they said, Muhammad, you are both accountable for everything: the quality, the schedule, the safety, and the cost. It's not one side or the other. And that was a change in the tone. And we really were very close, that he cannot keep adding scope. He cannot keep changing scope. And he cannot keep adding what they call golden whistles and bells on the project. So again, a joint accountable, and it doesn't have to be higher up. Bring those directors. Back to you, Saad. Sorry.
Wallahi, before I take the questions, you raised a very important point here, which is about change management, because simultaneously, while the project manager is building the new utility, facility, deliverable, whatever, the people at the business side should be preparing themselves to be capable and able to utilize the outputs and deliverables and use them. And in many cases, this requires that they change the way they are operating, which is not easy, because this is why they introduce a business change manager who usually takes care of making sure that once I give you this facility as an operation, you are capable of utilizing it, integrating it with your existing business day-to-day until it becomes business as usual, but at an elevated layer. So I think this is something we should also discuss next. But allow me to take some questions. I would like to tell our audience, I'm gonna read the questions from the Q&A. There is a special tab on Q&A other than the chat. So please post your questions there. So to start from the beginning, Khalid Al-Harbi is asking, how can we maintain continuity of the project sponsor, and what mitigation measures we should take to minimize the turnover impact if the sponsor changes?
Right.
So let me ask this question to Americo. What do you propose, Americo?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, it depends on the situation, but the point, it's all about risk management. So in my case, my past experience, I had some situations like that, and there was something that always happened in a specific company. And this way, it was not exactly a surprise, because many times it happened. So in the middle of a big project, a 1 year, 2 year project, there was a change of sponsor, because the executives, they leave the company all the time. So this is something that we could only ignore and just wait for when it happens. But in fact, we try to anticipate this problem and always have a kind of second sponsor, a little informal sponsor, but someone that was also aware about everything that was happening. So this second person was not responsible for taking decision like the sponsor, but anyway, it was someone that was also involved in the project. So in case of any emergency, possibly this person will become the new sponsor. So for me, there are many solutions, but the most important point is if there is something that indicate that this kind of thing can happen, we should do something about it, not just waiting for that, right? But if it's a big surprise, so plan B, it depends on the company, and we have to find a way. But of course, it's something really critical, no doubt.
The bottom line is that we cannot operate without a sponsor. We cannot manage a project without a sponsor. Absolutely, will not happen, because decision making in terms of authority, accountability, access to resources, removing blocks, all these things at the organizational level, it's the sponsor task rather than the project manager task. The project manager would ask for a change because there is a reason for that change, but who approves eventually? The sponsor, according to, let me go back to what Ross said, to the business case, whether or not the business case requires this change or not, for example. You wanted to say something, Muhammad?
Yes. So this is a very good question. What if the project sponsor change? And it happens. A VP who was a sponsor, a senior VP, moves on. He gets sent to a different part of the organization. And the new guy may not believe in it, actually. And I'll be frank, they say, oh, it's not my project. If it was to me, I would not have invested in that project. This is the previous senior VP or VP selection. And he may even take a negative approach. Then the project is part of the business. You have to go higher. Okay? I will go higher and let's make sure we have the same support and belief, because there are realities. And some people say really a downstream chemical plant of this and this is the best investment for us. And the next guy may not believe in that. And he's not going to be as supportive. So let's find solution. That's my comment.
You go back to the strategy, basically, because if the strategy mandated we need this type of project or investment, you are going to find a supporter upstairs who wants this to continue to realize the strategy, not change everything each time we change a leader. Now I have another question. Somebody is asking the chapter to do a survey with some of the larger companies to engage sponsors. Ask if they engage project sponsors on small or mid-level project. And in this case, what's the responsibility of the sponsor? I'd like to ask this to Ricardo, because you used to be in the UNIPS, and back then you used to manage maybe hundreds of relatively small projects in diverse locations. So what happens then? Do you, with respect, if you have small and mid-level project, what about the sponsor in this case?
Okay, thank you, Saad. Just before I go to this, I want just to add one quick note on America's answer. I think Ahmed here on the comments, he said the same, is that sometimes when the risk of some sponsor leaving is too high, for example, you're doing, for example, a digital transformation or a massive project, you use a structure like a sponsoring committee. You know, instead of having just one person doing that, you have a group. And this, I would say, minimize the risk of someone leaving. Okay, so I just want to highlight on that. Now, going back to your my experience at the United Nations Office for Project Services is that we had some large projects, but the vast majority were middle-sized levels spread out towards pretty much the entire planet. So what we did, we created a dual role of sponsorship. We had a project sponsorship that would, I would say, coach, help the decision-making of more than 500 project managers that we had at that time, and the local sponsor that takes care of different projects on that unity. So, for example, I was a sponsor directly on some very critical, risky projects, but most of the time I had a team in my structure of, I would say, senior people that would support these, I would say, would be sponsor of something like 20, 25 different projects, you know, because they require far less intervention. And one point, we used a technique that is very used in Prince2, that's called management by exception. So we reduce everything to managing exception. It means you don't report, you don't call for a meeting with your sponsor just to say everything is fine. If you don't call, means everything is fine. If you're calling, it's because you need something. And then we use this exception base to manage these large size. And of course, we fine-tuned our presence because, for example, if a crisis in a region increases dramatically due to a natural disaster, then we mobilize, you know, people to sponsor the projects there. At the end, I was the final sponsor of pretty much most of the projects, but I was not directly. So there was, I would say, a chain of scaling in terms of the exception we were facing in a project.
Okay, I believe you raised the third point, which I was going to talk about. Let's start with it. I'll continue the questions in a bit. And it's about the essential role of governance practiced by board of directors, portfolio board, and sponsor for the success of projects. And this is something we would like to discuss, starting with Ross, if you can tell us a bit about what are, because you mentioned the board and Ricardo mentioned the board, the term board, we heard it several times today.
Mhm.
Can you tell us what is the board? Why do you need the board? What does it do in terms of governance? What's its relationship with the sponsor? We'll start with you, Ross, and take it to the other colleagues with us today.
Sure. Well, let's start with that project sponsor, because the project sponsors, you know, if we agree, they're accountable for the success of the project. What you don't want, though, is somebody in isolation making key decisions that can impact the whole of the organization. So you need to support them and support them with the key stakeholders. So the key stakeholders, the core stakeholders, core decision makers for that project sit on the project board with the project sponsor. And your aim is to keep that board as tight as possible. And I note we're talking about projects, we haven't spoken about programs, and there's complexities around that dynamic and so forth. But so the board's there to support the project sponsor. I've seen some organizations say, well, therefore, I'll draw the board off to the side and the project sponsor is the main decision maker. I think that's letting them off the hook. You want the people sitting on the project board to be engaged in that decision making and to be part of that decision making. And the role of the project sponsor is to make sure they agree with every decision that's coming out of the board. And if there's no agreement, they have to indicate what is the way forward. Does that make sense?
So you have a board, and the board is led by the sponsor.
Yes.
But ultimately, the sponsor is the one accountable. So if they come to a certain agreement, then the vote or the opinion of the sponsor is the one that makes it.
That's right. And I'm not sure.
Because he is accountable, or she.
Yes, because they're accountable. They can't be accountable if they don't get to make the final decisions. And I think Prince 2 stated it very well. I'm not sure if it's still in the document, but it used to have a statement that said the project board is not a democracy controlled by votes. Yeah, which is saying the project sponsors the main person. They make the end decision. But, you know, you've got to bear in mind that any project board where there's constant disagreement over the right way to go is a project that's got a problem. Yeah. So basically 99% of the time you expect most of the people on the board to be in agreement on the way forward. But the final decision has to rest with the project sponsor. Just to pick up on something that Ricardo mentioned that I thought was really good on that previous question about low risk and, you know, medium-sized projects and so forth, and do they need a project sponsor? Yeah, absolutely they do. Every project should have a project sponsor, but we know that if we put too much governance in place, we're going to kill a small project. It just doesn't need it. So the point that Ricardo made is that you can have a project sponsor who's sponsor for maybe 20 projects. Yeah, and that can be, if they're very small projects, what you do is you push the accountability for that project sponsorship down into the organization, get it away from the C level, get it away from the direct report level and take it down another level so that small projects still have an owner. What you don't want is orphans. You don't want projects that are orphans. And an orphan is a project that doesn't have a sponsor.
Very good point. So Americo, now with respect to these boards that support the project sponsor, what can PMOs provide in terms of service or support to both sponsorship and boards that sponsor projects?
Well, there are some different things that I've already seen in big companies, different countries. For example, I've seen some boards like that, and PMOs are responsible for defining when a board is necessary or not. So depending on the complexity of the project, it can be managed in a different way. The second point is about who should compose this board in terms of level, in the organization. Sometimes it should be a very senior executive or not. And finally, the PMO will naturally provide information for the decision-making process. So that's what we see very frequently in many different companies. So that there is a big integration between the PMO supporting this board in terms of making decisions, but usually, and some of our colleagues mentioned that there is someone that is responsible, that is the chair of this board, and this person usually is the sponsor. That's what I see more frequently in different companies, in different industries.
Very good. So, Muhammad, what do you think about the project board? In your large projects, the project board was made for one project or for multiple, especially the large ones, giga projects?
Well, we didn't have a project board all the time. We had in my last project, Saturn, the Aramco Total Refinery, we had a project committee that represented the board, and it was from both sides, Total, French side, and the Saudi Aramco side. And that project committee was very, very effective. They were the right people, and they pushed us, but they also supported us. When we needed a decision, they were there. At the end of the job, we were meeting almost monthly. And we tell them what are the issues. Give us a decision on this. We'll push for decision. They challenge us. No, we don't want to do that. But since we're all operation, PMT, and the quality and the auditors, everybody there. It's a project committee. Let's not call it a board. Let's call it a board is a board, but let's call it a project committee that is representatives of the different important parts of the company that are there to make a decision. So yes, that was very effective in SATA project. It took away some of our decision-making capabilities. I agree. However, because they were there available for us, they did not hesitate to come when we need them to make a decision. So that was very useful for us.
So the nice thing is that you bring all the key decision makers rather than just stakeholders and put them in one room together. So whenever there is an issue or change or a strategic decision, a very large and critical decision for the project that the project manager cannot by himself do, the sponsor, maybe he has the authority, but not necessarily all the technical knowledge and all the detailed knowledge from all the other parties. You put them in one room together, and then now you have better decision-making capabilities that would serve the project to move ahead furthermore.
And structure it. We used to meet, like I said, every quarters, and at the end became monthly. You don't need to call it khalas, because they want to come and check how are you doing. They want to see the progress. And if you have a problem, they don't want to wait another month for them to hear about it, because a month is too long at the end of the job.
Yeah. Very good point. Ricardo, would like to add anything on this point before we take some more questions and move ahead?
No, I'm fine. I'm just hearing, and I cannot agree more with this. I would say many times when we call the concept of board or committee, we need just to be sensitive on where the decision-making process relies on. So it's a very strong comment. Yeah, and good.
Perhaps when we say board, many people understand the board of directors, or maybe a board at organization level managing a portfolio of projects and awarding within phase gates and whatnot. But then when it comes to a project board, maybe some call it a committee for the board, just to differentiate. But as long as we agree on the function, that this function is positive and needed and pushes the project forward, this is good. Now, I'm thinking to leave all the questions till the end. I still have two points rounds to finalize together. The second point now, actually the fourth, discuss the organizational perspective on projects like value chain, portfolio, strategic alignment, and benefit realization. Now, all these things, when we talk about portfolio, when we talk about benefit realization, when we talk about strategic alignment, the perspective is the organization rather than the project. The project is a component, and the program is a component there. But we are talking from the perspective of the organization. So, and the sponsor, as we agreed, is coming from the operation side of the organization. So he's part of the permanent structure. Whereas projects and programs are temporary structure. Once they finish their task, they dissolve. So the topic of, and I found here a question from our friend, Ms. Hiba Shihi. She is the PMO director of Dubai Municipality, award winner, PMO Global Alliance, and PMI as well. She was asking the level of involvement of the project sponsor with regard to measuring benefit achieved by project, which is exactly the same concept we're talking about. What is the involvement of the sponsor when it comes to strategic alignment, to benefit realization, and portfolio management in general? And who likes to start? Ricardo, let's start with you.
This is, I think it's a super relevant point, because I think that every single project, of course, must be connected to the benefit and to the strategy. And I think that, for example, one of the key roles of the sponsor is to make sure that people doing the job, they don't lose focus on what is the big picture. You know, because sometimes, you know, most of the time when you dig into the project daily work, you know, procurement and trying to manage, there is a risk that at some point you say, am I still delivering benefits? I want to tell you, because we were all telling stories here. I used to work a lot with venture capital and startups and these small companies. And I need to be honest, one of the biggest risks of the founder's mindset is this, because sometimes you have just a magic idea that is truly good, that will deliver a massive benefit. And then you remove your hat as, I would say, this innovation, and you put your hat as, now I need to do it. And then you go deep and you just lose the connection. And then 6 months later, you said, bingo, I have the product in my hands now. But then you say, oh God, but the market does not need it anymore, because now 25 different companies are doing that. But during that journey, you lost the sight, because benefits are in this volatile environment we live in. They change. They change what is important. You know, so many times you start a project, you need to reshift your priorities, because things don't just change. You know, the market, the landscape, geopolitics, resources, and you need, and who is responsible to make sure this alignment happens? The first one is the sponsor, because he or she is exactly this link to make sure, look, you know, we need to come back here a little bit more and have this perception. Otherwise, you produce on time, on budget, something that does not deliver any outcome. And this becomes pointless.
Okay.
If I can add a comment here, Dr. Saadi, maybe another way of looking at it is that the project goes through different phases, and the project sponsor can change during these phases. So the initial phase of scope and preliminary design, feed 1, feed 2, and drawing exactly what is the deliverables, then you really need a business side sponsor to make sure they know what they want. But once you move into an execution phase of the project, contracting and start working with the contractor, you may need different capabilities because the scope is fixed. Nothing is going to change. But perhaps you need to work more with maybe some local authorities. Okay, so I need somebody from the government relation to help me fix some of the problems I need with the local authority who's not giving me the right of way or the permit. Okay, or I need somebody go and convince the contracting department that I need to make this change in the contract. See, maybe that's another way of looking at it. I don't know what you guys think. I see Mirko is agreeing with me.
I would like Ross to provide his input on this specifically, please. What Muhammad just said about changing or shifting the sponsor. What do you think about it? And of course, the original inquiry about the participation or role of the sponsor in strategic alignment and benefit and portfolio.
Okay, so the project sponsor, the reason that they're doing the project in the first place is to get certain benefits. They need those benefits to be able to continue to do a good job in their day-to-day role. Yeah, that's why they need a project. So they're accountable for the benefits. Now, it's all very well and good a project having benefits, but those benefits have to link back to the strategy of the organization. Now, without going into the detail, you go from vision to strategy, and then the strategy should have strategic objectives which provide more granularity. But even then, what you would need to do, so a strategic objective might be increase revenue by 10% in the next 2 years. Well, that's all very well and good, but if you've got 20 products, which products are we talking about? So you have to break the strategic objectives down into measures of contribution, strategic contribution, that projects can then link their benefits to. So that's how you get that linkage all the way from projects and their benefits. If you like, it's top down, vision, strategy, strategic objectives, down to measures of strategic contribution. And that's at a low enough level for the project then to come up and say, these are the benefits we're delivering, and they link to these measures of strategic contribution. So that's the first bit. Remind me what the second bit was, Sadi. I've forgotten.
Okay. Muhammad was.
Oh, yes. I remember that changing. I tend to think that you're better off having the same project sponsor throughout the life of the project, because even when you go into implementation and the scope is fixed, there can always be situations, like for instance, the classic situation would be if the project starts to go over budget. So a decision is made that we have to cut scope because there's no more budget. We have to cut scope. So the question is, what scope do we cut? Now, if the project is in the hands of the delivery people at this stage, their performance is measured on time and cost. So what they'll do is they'll cut scope that meets their performance objectives. But meanwhile, the business owner, they're interested in benefits. And if the delivery agent is cutting the scope, it might severely impact the benefits that that project will deliver. So no longer does it link to the strategy of the organization, or not to the extent that was originally considered. So I think it's always better. I hear what Muhammad's saying, and it's a good point, but I think it's always better to support the board with the right people, but keep that sponsor as constant as you can throughout the life of the project. One of the leading indicators of project failure is significant turnover of project sponsors. Okay. So you don't want turnover.
Well, okay, Ross, you're absolutely right. We don't want to be changing the end user executive sponsor, but I'm saying along the way, there are new phases or new problems or new issues that need a different. The senior VP of upstream, he cannot fix a contracting issue because that's contracting department is not under him altogether.
Yeah.
or he cannot
Yeah.
work with the local authority. That's not up to him. So that's the kind of thing I'm referring to.
And
No,
I agree entirely with that, Mohammed.
Keep the end executive sponsor. Yes, he's going to always be there, but perhaps you need more level or C-level sponsor along the way.
I agree entirely with that.
Thank you.
Okay, and to wrap this point up with Americo,
Yeah,
with
I'd
respect
like
to, yeah,
make a quick comment about this discussion. Actually, Ricardo, Ross, Mohammed, all of you are saying very important points. Based on what we have been observing in different PMOs, talking about real life in different types of companies. Actually, there is a gap in terms of understanding about the role of the sponsor. It's a fact that most of the sponsors, they understand their role only in a tactical point of view. So they are really concerned about the deliverables, the project should be completed. So the commitment with business results, it's not something really clear in many companies. And why? Because there is a gap in terms of portfolio management, benefit realization management. It's something that everyone wanted, but just little companies really do something like that, something that we could call benefit management. So there's just a big gap in terms of how the sponsor should behave, and it connects us with the first thing that we discussed here. Do our sponsors really know what they should do, what is expected from them? From the tactical point of view, I think possibly, but from the strategic point of view, it's something that it's not really clear, especially in those companies that are not world-class companies, big companies. So that's a real challenge in terms of educating these people, these executives, and expand their point of view about how they should behave, what is expected from them.
I think that's a really good point, Americo. I think too many sponsors are focused on delivery performance, time, cost, and quality, and not outcome performance, benefits and outcomes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me.
That's the gap.
Yeah, I want just to step in because this was a fantastic point, Ross. Some people think that is a normal career progression. You start as a team member, then a project manager, then you become project sponsor. No, it's not. It's not that you are an ultra with a high expertise in managing, delivering time and cost. Although if this is the case, then you will manage a very large, complex project. But to be a sponsor is different. And I want to wait in the discussion between Mohammed and you, Ross, on the one sponsor, several sponsors. I work a lot with large projects, large complex projects. What happens in this case, as I said, it's a governing board. That is the G of ESG, right? It's a governing board where there is a final major executive sponsor of that initiative that will keep track on everything from the beginning to the end, as you just mentioned. But in this governing board, there is someone that is more with a strong expertise in one area of the project that will, I would say, do and support the project manager on that specific effort. And I'm saying this kind of governing board is something that is very common in these large complex programs, because you cannot have one person, because, for example, in the oil sector, some projects, they take many years. So you don't have this ability to have, I would say, one single person taking care of this 10-year project. So this is why this governing board takes a place, and it's very useful in this case. Just want to weigh in on that.
Good point.
Thank you.
Excellent points. And this gets us to the last point, which was supposed to be second. The traits and competency skills required for a sponsor. And I have my friend from Bahrain, Iman Baibul, she's asking if we are to design a training program to project sponsor, what will be the key items that we should cover that project sponsor should master? So
let's get them educated first on project management, because sometimes they don't understand the project management and they look at project managers as contractors and do this. Well, come on, get to know our business first before you start telling us what to do. At least one thing, get him to understand a little bit how project management is done.
I think this is important because how do you support a project manager if you don't know what a project manager is and what their requirements are? Maybe not to the extent of becoming a project manager yourself, because this is not your job. And we don't want sponsors to micromanage. We want them to support from above, to facilitate, to provide the needed delegation and empowerment and budget and change and decision in due time. So what do we have, Ross, for the sponsor? What are the typical A sponsor, if you like, capabilities and competencies?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think part of it very much comes back to what Americo was saying, which is that gap. And that gap, I think too many project sponsors focus on time, cost, and quality, which are all very important. We all agree they're important, but there's that whole question of benefits and what is the outcome you're trying to achieve and so forth. And that, I think, is the gap that Americo was referring to. So they need to understand that. And then I agree also that they need to understand what the role of the project manager is, but not just the project manager. They need to understand the project manager's role. They need to understand their own role. They need to understand the role of the other members of the project board and what they can expect from them. And then they need to know what is the limit of their decision-making. When do they have to escalate a query to a portfolio board or a program board? So that means they need to understand their position in the environment and the environment itself. And then, of course, you've got the leadership issues, and I'm sure Americo, Ricardo, Mohammed will be across those probably better than I am, I'm sure.
Okay. So, Mohammed, what are the characteristics of a good sponsor?
Well, his knowledge, of course, at the executive level. Once you go into the executive level, he has the leadership capabilities and that the project sponsor role would require. I'm assuming that's what my experience. Yes.
Yeah.
The other issue is that he has to also, to me, is find, and that's a challenge we had. You have a very strong leader in the organization, business side, who is a sponsor, but at the same time, the poor guy has his own day-to-day work, not this is project. He's a VP of, I don't know, gas operation. Well, yes, there is a new gas plant being built and he's the sponsor, but at the same time, he has 10 other gas plants that are running with their day-to-day issues. Okay, so how can he go about it? I know I'm not answering the question directly, but this is an issue we have today, because this guy will answer daily to the daily fires he has in his running plants. And the new project gas plant is not going to be always the priority for him, especially if it is in a remote location.
So Americo, what do you do in this case? If the sponsor, okay, he has leadership, he has authority, he comes from operation, but he does not have the needed commitment in terms of time, because they just added him as a sponsor, and now instead of working 10 hours per day, he needs to work 14 or 16 hours per day without taking away any or delegating any other responsibilities. What do you do?
Yeah. Sadi, in fact, it depends on who you are, right, in this situation. If you are the project manager, because it's a fact that sometimes there is nothing we can do, right? That's the person that was signed to be a sponsor. There is nothing that I can do. So actually, in my point of view, it's everything about risk management. Again, it's something that I know that will happen. So I have to recognize that and find different alternatives. Sometimes I've already had a situation in several projects years ago, possibly more than 5 or 6 big projects. The sponsor was one person, but the real sponsor was not a formal one, but was the person that really supported me, you know. And is it the ideal, the best practice? Absolutely not, but this is the real world, right? And just to complement the previous discussion about competences, I'd like to suggest change management, but from the human perspective, right? Because the technical stuff, usually the project manager is taking care of that. But in a big picture, this human perspective of change management is something very important, especially for transformation projects. So that's something that I believe that sponsors should be prepared to deal with.
Okay, very good points. Transformation, very important, whether it is digital, cultural, organizational. We live in a world of change, and if we are going to sponsor this change, you know, need to know how to go around it and support it and make it happen. Now, Ricardo, what are you are going to hire a sponsor?
Yeah, allow me, sorry to interject here. Again, on the capabilities or the quality of the sponsor. Maybe it's not a question of capabilities, it's a capacity issue. And I want to again give an example. If we are building a new refinery outside the company boundaries, you have to deal with local authorities, the power company, the utilities company, maybe you need the port authority to support. Well, the senior VP of gas or oil or IT, he as much as he would love the job to be done, he cannot help there. You see? So because that's outside the boundaries of the company. His authorities do not work there. So you need to go and find another sponsor. I'm not saying change, but a complementing sponsor. Let's get somebody who knows how to handle the port authority, who is the right guy to talk to the local municipalities to give you the right of way when you're building a new pipeline that is cutting across some of the local areas. See, because that's not that's a different area of capabilities.
So Ricardo.
Look, I prepared some of the list here, and I agree with everybody. But for me, if I was, I would say, selecting a project sponsor, or if I was preparing a course to train project sponsors, I think complex problem solving. You know, someone that is able to understand exactly what Mohammed just said. You know, the complexity of, I would say, human behavior, political behavior, and know how to navigate these complex systems. And this is something, look, just to give you an idea, I was on the flight from France to here in Portugal, where I live today. I was watching, because I'm doing a course from MIT on system dynamics and complex systems, exactly trying to figure out what kind of model can you use to solve this complex thinking. And this, for me, is something that is very critical for sponsor thinking in large relevant projects. Another one is negotiation, ability to negotiate, ability to understand and move, I would say, from what is your desired output or outcome and the other side. So how to manage this. And this goes back to what America said. It's about this human behavior, you know, this politics, the problem solving, ability to communicate, ability to make this, even to make decisions. Because we talk about decisions, but I had a chance to see leaders with a lot of, I would say, delegated authority, but with a low ability to make decisions. And sometimes decisions are so critical, and you need to make them in a timely way. And many times, as the Malcolm Gladwell book called Blink says, sometimes you don't have the full information to make a decision, but you must make a decision anyway. So these are, I would say, the top qualities of a project sponsor, someone that is able to make this kind of decision fast.
That's a very interesting book, by the way, Blink. I've read it.
Yeah, it's an excellent. Yeah, excellent.
By the way, before I move to the other questions, Hamad, some people are asking about the PDUs, please.
Okay, I did post it. We have the PDUs, and I have posted it on the chat session.
Okay, great.
So please look at that chat session. I think, yeah, it's there. Maybe it's, where did I cannot find it now, but I thought I did post it. Yeah, here it is. The code of PDUs, you'll find it there.
Excellent, thank you.
Look at the chat session.
Now, a question from Hafiz. What if there is no project sponsor in the project? And he's talking applicable for both client and contractor organization. How to escalate this within the organization? What do you think, Ross?
Well, there's no good option to having a project sponsor. If there's no project sponsor, you need a project sponsor. How to escalate this within the organization. It's interesting, isn't it? One of the loneliest things in the world is a project manager who needs to make a decision, knows it's not theirs to make, and looks up and all they see is blue sky. It's a very lonely position to be in, because they know that if there's nobody above them, not only will there not be a decision forthcoming, but they'll be the one that's blamed because the decision's late, which goes back to your cartoon, because the project's late, which goes back to your cartoon at the very start. So how do you escalate it? It depends on the structure within the organization. If I was a project manager and there was no project sponsor, this is one of the reasons project managers need to understand the role of project sponsors, because they then have to go to a senior person or a program board or a portfolio committee and say, look, there's a gap here. This is the implications of there not being a project sponsor. You need to get somebody in place very quickly. My reading of the situation is it probably should be this person, but of course that's your decision. So that's the direction I'd head down in that situation. Just one other question, one other comment on the point that Mohammed was making about capacity being an issue, because we all strike that, don't we? Quite often the role of project sponsor continuously falls to a certain number of people in the organization, and they can get swamped. Right. And it falls to them because of the position they hold in the organization. They're the natural person to be the project sponsor. One of the things, there's two things you can do. Firstly, is there an opportunity to push that accountability down lower into a direct report to the project sponsor in the business organization? But if that doesn't work, if you definitely have got the right person, the other thing you can do is appoint somebody called it'll be a title like project sponsor delegate. And what happens is this might be a direct report to the project sponsor. They step into that delegate role and they take the load off the project sponsor, share a lot of the responsibilities, but they don't share the accountability. The accountability stays with the project sponsor. It's just that they do the legwork for the project sponsor. And that's one way that I found in the past can help a project sponsor. Sorry.
Okay, great. My friend Muhammad Khair Damashi is asking, what about having a committee as the sponsor? It will consist of different key stakeholders, project like business owner, client, PMO, etc. What do you think, Americo? You are muted.
Yes, and I couldn't hear you well. Could you?
Oh, okay.
I can't find.
The question about what about having a committee as the sponsor?
Okay. Yes. We discussed that a little a few time ago. Actually, we call that boards or committees. So
Yeah.
it's something that I've already seen in different companies. Usually, as I said, they are organized and maintained by PMOs. But to be very honest, it's not something very common, right? Usually, you have the executive board, and they act as a committee because they are aware about the projects, especially the strategic ones, the more important projects, and they act when they are needed. But specific committees or board for projects, it's usual when you have a very big project, capital project. So maybe it could be a little more usual, but most of the companies, I don't see that, to be very honest.
Okay, now there are multiple questions. Is the sponsor going to be a single person or a team? I believe we answered that. He's a single person, but he's supported by a committee or a board. And Abdulrahman al-Dosari asking, can the project manager be the project sponsor or vice versa? What do you think, Ricardo?
Yeah, I think it's not a good practice at all. Okay, if it's a small project, okay, maybe you are the sponsor, the owner, the client, the team, you are everything. But in larger projects, one of the critical things of the relationship between the project manager and the project sponsor is your ability to share and talk to someone, to have a different point of view. And this, if you don't have these two roles in different people, it's the only thing you can do is self-reflection, because you cannot bounce back ideas and say, look, I'm thinking about doing this as a project manager. What do you think? What is your view? What do you think we can handle? For example, I saw some of the comments, this late payment, for example, in the project. How do we handle? If you don't have this person to bounce back, it's very challenging for you. So it's not a good practice at all, okay, doing that. And in large projects, then it's not at all, okay? Then it's not at all. It's not recommended at all.
Perhaps if you are an entrepreneur, you have your own money, you are investing your money, and you're managing your own new venture as a project, then you are both, but you can live like that only to the extent where you are reaching growth. Once you want to grow and build a structure and have something sustainable, you're gonna have to split the sponsor.
Dear Sadi, let me just share a fun example. Even when you plan your holiday, if you are married, you have a sponsor. You have a sponsor, you need to bounce back ideas. You just don't make decisions that, by yourself. So it's always...
Don't get yourself in trouble.
Okay, so this is just one comment. So I truly believe that you need to have these two in the different roles.
Now a question to Muhammad. What should be the approach of the project if the sponsor is doing micromanagement on every activity? What should the project manager do?
I'm sorry, the question again, that's to me?
Yes, you have a project manager and his sponsor is doing micromanagement. So he puts his hand in everything. What should he do?
Well, I guess it is a challenging thing. This is can be a sponsor or your boss who gets involved. It's a question of building a trust over time, and it's not an easy solution. And that's one thing we had with the project committee I was referring to. You just have to deal with it in that way. He is making decisions. They were getting involved. They took away a lot of our financial authority for us, and we accepted that. And just you have to cater to that if you know what are the backgrounds to it. I don't know. I don't have, if he gets in front, maybe just telling him, okay, come and take my role one way or another. And that's not the most diplomatic answer. But if he gets involved in a lot of decision making, it depends on the phase. Maybe that's another thing I want to go back to. Phases change in the early phase versus the late phase. I don't know. I'll leave the door open to the other gentleman to help with the answer.
Ross, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario. We've all been there. And it comes down to personalities in some case, even if you train the sponsor so they know what their role is, which is big picture strategy, managing those key aspects of the business case, and let the project manager get on with managing the details of the project. Even if they know that, if you've got the wrong personality there, it can still occur. And I'm with Mohammed. I'm not sure how you get around that. You know, you can train until you're blue in the face, but if they've got that personality that says, you know, I'm risk averse and I want to make sure that they're doing exactly what I want, then, you know, you can point out the downside. The downside is they're marking their own homework, because if they're making all the project management decisions, that at the project board level, they're looking at what they've decided, as opposed to getting a project manager to push forward solutions based upon their expertise as a project manager. So you're probably not getting the best outcomes from the project anyway.
Well, the micromanagement, as one of the audience said, is a result of mistrust. So there is a bigger issue there.
It's a result of what, sorry?
Mistrust between the sponsor and the project team. So there is a bigger issue. It's not just micromanagement. It's a whole thing that they don't seem to trust each other. So
yeah, it can be lack of confidence as well. Can be lack of confidence. It can be feelings of being exposed, that they want to get so involved in the project. So if anyone questions them about the project, they've always got an answer. So if that's the case, if that's the reason for them delving down, what you can do is brief them better. Make sure they're always briefed about what's happening to the project, and that might help.
Give them the dashboard on a weekly basis. That's it. Just keep telling them you have a weekly dashboard, you have a monthly dashboard of the project. Give him these numbers on time, ahead of time. Make him happy. Let him know that you are going in the right direction, and he will stop, hopefully, getting to micromanage.
The people in micromanagement will never stop unless his boss comes and hands in other tasks to them. So the only way to get them out of your way is that they get assigned their own jobs to do, and now they don't have time for you, and suddenly trust happens.
Get him busy with something else.
Yeah. I've seen lots of questions about how to train, with what type of training, what do we train them and what not. And here I have a small intervention. I believe every sponsor should be trained a little bit on understanding what the project is, a lot on leadership, as you mentioned, all the traits of good leadership, servant leader, whatever. And of course, they need to know a little bit about portfolio management, and a little bit about managing benefit, and a little bit about governance. Probably these are the things that are important, that they will practice. They need to learn these things. Now, somebody's asking, project sponsor and project owner, are they the same person? Who would like to answer this? Sponsor versus owner. Owner is the owner organ. Yeah.
In the past, I've often used that term project owner and project sponsor interchangeably. The key is being clear what you're talking about. Yeah, so defining their accountability and defining the responsibilities. And then you can call them whatever you like, really, as long as you're clear what those two things are, particularly the accountability. So I think that they can be the same if you want them to be the same.
So there is a question for you, Ricardo, from our friend Mona Zgher. And she's asking about what differs in the role of a sponsor when the team leader is managing the project using a disciplined, agile methodology, which is an important thing. She I think.
Yeah, no,
question
it's
highlights.
yeah. What is the concept is that one of the key aspects of agile is to have, I would say, what I used to call SDWT is a self-directed work team. For example, in agile, you don't have the role of someone managing the work of others. What happens is that the full team manages the project together. And this is a great aspect of agile and sometimes a great challenge too. So the role of the sponsor is to represent and make sure that this team has all the resources and everything that is needed to do the work, so that there is the right environment for them to flourish and work as a team. So it's much more an enabler to create the environment where the discipline agile or any agile team can work together. And this is the role of sponsorship. Most of the time, there is a decision-making framework that allows the team to decide by themselves. So it's not something that I would say in a waterfall, you go to the project manager to approve something or not approve something. In this case, the team has the autonomy to make, I would say, most of the decisions with this framework of decisions. And the sponsor creates all this enablement environment for them to do the work. So it's like different role here.
Yeah.
But also, even in agile, there is a threshold. And if you
absolutely.
Threshold, then the sponsor will have to answer back. So there is an escalation policy. Now, from Wael, he's talking about companies that are incorporated mainly to execute a single massive mandate. What options are there to designate a sponsor other than the CEO or board of directors? Would you like to answer that, Americo? You are...
Yeah, while I think Americo dropped, so let me start. So while he comes back, but I just want to say this is called okay, where I used to work, it's called a specific purpose company, and this is exactly when you create all the fiduciary framework of the company to be connected to the project. So usually, in this kind of company that has a very specific purpose, for example, I do a lot of works in Brazil. And in Brazil, for example, when you were creating a hydroelectric power plant, that is a massive. So the partners, the owners, they create a specific purpose company where the CEO of this company is like the program director, you know, responsible for everything. And the project board, the board of directors of this company is this sponsoring entity, but this company will be dissolved, for example, when operation starts, for example. So it lasts for maybe 3, 4, 5 years and they dissolve. And this is to give one of the aims, a legal framework to that, because sometimes inside the company, you don't have, I would say, this complete legal framework. But on that specific case, for example, you can attribute responsibilities on every single level of the project while the project exists using the country legal framework.
Okay.
I think, Sadi, also that those sorts of organizations are often set up to expedite decision-making because they feel that having a company whose focus is purely on the project or the program will make faster and more effective decisions than otherwise, but there's a risk associated with it. And the risk is that when you set up a special purpose vehicle such as this, or Ricardo, a specific purpose company, same thing. When you set it up, potentially you're taking the project away from the business that is going to inherit that project and making decisions, if you're not careful, in isolation. And that can be dangerous. You've got to make sure that the core business stays involved in the decision-making if the project isn't being run from within their organization, if that makes sense. Otherwise, you can end up without, otherwise, what you can get is the SPV is setting about delivering an asset as opposed to delivering business outcomes. And there's a difference between assets and business outcomes.
Okay. Now, I believe we are about to end our session, but there are lots of questions coming in. I would like each one of you to select a question from the Q&A and answer it, and we'll apologize from the others. But I would like to start with our friend Ahmed Abdessalam from Tunis about the role a sponsor should play in terms of bridging the gap between strategy, design, and delivery.
Do you want to start with me?
Yeah, if you like, because he addresses the question to you.
Yeah, I saw this is one because when I heard you saying, okay, so first, thank you very much, because I'm sure he asked this because I created the Coursera course, Bridging the Gap between Strategy, Design, and Delivery. But the role of the sponsor is exactly, for example, when you were doing, for example, a transformation, organizational transformation, this is usually a massive program. And the role of the sponsorship and the senior executives is exactly to create an environment to make this happen. For example, in the case, I want just to use an example. In the case of PMI, the CEO of PMI was the sponsor of that. And there was an executive leadership team. I'm just using this as an example, composed by 5 the most senior members of PMI, like I would say this is sponsoring committee on that. So the role was to make sure that all the cultural aspects of transformation, all the resources were in place to do that. And this was a 2.5-3 year project, with massive implications on the cultural side and the human side. And I just want to suggest there is a brilliant article of Professor Tabrizi talking exactly about that and about technology and talking about this human side and how the sponsors and the leadership team must be aware of that. And it's an HBR article called Digital Transformation is Not About Technology, talking about exactly this change management component. So this is what we try to address on this concept of bridging the gap.
Excellent. So, Americo, are you back with us?
Yes, I am, but I can't turn on my video.
Okay. Did you select the question? If you can select the question and answer it for our audience.
Actually, when I try to turn on my video, there is a message. You can start because the host has stopped it. I think you should authorize.
Or maybe the registration.
I'll ask you.
Okay.
How can the type of PMO impact the role of the sponsor? Whether it is, they say, directing, strategic, administrative. Yeah.
Depending on the focus of the PMO, the way that you will interact with the sponsor will be totally different. Actually, there was a previous discussion about the difference between project owner and project sponsor. There are some places that they define it to different roles. So the project owner has a little more strategic approach. Sometimes is someone from the senior board, and the project sponsor is an executive, sometimes a middle level executive, but with a little more tactical approach. So it's a difference between the commitment with benefits and commitment with deliverables. So of course, if the PMO is more strategic, it's easier. Easier is not a good word because it's never easy, but it's you have more chances to approach all these things that we are discussing in a more strategical way. So the connection with benefits, etc., I mean, it looks much more viable, especially if you are connected directly with top executives. So PMOs can be really critical and key to make everything happen.
Great. Now, Muhammad, what's your question? Or I can select one for you.
Well, I've seen a couple of questions, so let me talk about it. So one was talking about if the sponsor is not buying into the vision and the mission of the project, and another one talks about payments and not getting paid on time. Then there is an organizational issue that needs to be fixed. Okay? A project business case should be presented to the company board, right? And once that board of the company approve the business case, then okay, let's go and start engineering phase and come back with a project scope and get another approval from the project board. After that, the project sponsor cannot change the vision. He cannot change the business case. If he does that, then he really needs to go back to the board of the company and represent the case. That's his area, not the project. Okay, so that's something in there, and that's where PMOD and the capital project management system need to fix. Project sponsor and also the funding of the project. Once you start an engineering phase, the allocation of funds for that project, for the engineering phase should be set. That's a process, that's a procedure by the company. And once you go into an execution phase where billions of dollars are going to be committed to contractors, you cannot ensure the project team should not be worrying about the funding, really. Because that's a company who said, okay, I'm allocating this amount because this is what I approved the business case for the project. It's going to cost me that much. And the money is assigned to the project. Of course, it's still with the company, but no question about payment and funding later on.
Okay, excellent point. Ross, what's the question? I saw a question about having two sponsors.
Oh, I didn't see that one. I can comment on that if you like.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. What's really important is having a single point of accountability for the success of your project. Single point of accountability. One of the reasons it's important is that it empowers that person, whoever is nominated as that single point of accountability, the project sponsor. It empowers them to make decisions. The organization expects them to make decisions. If you try and share accountability, which is what you're doing there, you can just end up in a complex he said, she said arrangement, and you don't want to go there. You've got to, it's very important to have that single point of accountability. But the question I was going to answer, if I can do it just really briefly,
Sure.
We touched on the agile methodology, the agile process, and the role of the sponsor. And I think one of the roles of the sponsor there is to make sure that the project board understands what agile is about, because agile requires a very light touch of governance. And the classic situation is if there's changes to requirements in a waterfall type project, that would probably go back to the project board. However, in an agile project, that's part of the responsibility and accountability given to the product owner leading that team. So you don't want the project board getting too involved in an agile methodology, but you still need that project sponsor role.
Great. So it has been my pleasure working with all of you, my friends. And this is an excellent panel, a lot to take out with. And I'd just like to finish by, if each one has any closing statement, and then hopefully we will meet again. Guess when, Abu Abdurrahman?
Guess
The global project management forum, inshallah. Okay. In 10 days we do have the Bahrain Gulf Downstream Association.
We will, inshallah.
We will, but in June we have the global project management forum, and that is something amazing. It was amazing last year, and it's going to be, inshallah, even a lot better this year, with the efforts being done by everybody. So,
Actually, last, because I do have a few comments from the chapter side. So I'll give the floor to the other gentleman.
okay. So, Americo.
So thank you very much. It was a great pleasure to participate. Take care of your sponsors, right? And I hope we can meet again very soon, and maybe in Riyadh in a few months. See you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ricardo.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you all. But for me, it's not just because we're panelists that, we are not learning. So I just want to thank the other panelists, because I also had many insights as I took note here. So thank you very much. And I think this kind of event just improves our community. And I'm very glad to have the opportunity to participate. Thank you.
Thank you. Andros.
Yeah, I'll just repeat that. I really appreciate being involved in this. And as Ricardo says, you learn so much from other panelists. You learn from some of the questions too. You get a broader understanding of what you're up against. And I think this type of discussion around a role such as a project sponsors is hugely important, because the majority of executives are selected on the basis of them running a day-to-day operation. And the first thing that happens when they sit down behind the desk is somebody hands them a piece of paper and says, you're now project sponsor for the project, for the following projects. And that wasn't even part of the hiring process. So it needs, as somebody mentioned it earlier on, it needs to be a much higher profile in organizations that senior executives invariably will end up being project sponsors for serious projects.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Hamad, can you take the lead, please?
Sure, thank you. I'll start with a story. I mean, I like telling stories. And again, my most successful project was the Saturn. And even the sponsor needs a sponsor. Even the sponsor needs support. And one thing I saw throughout the project was the executive support. We had the two CEOs of Total. At the time, it was Christopher de Margerie, the late Christophe, and at the time it was the ex-CEO Khaled Al Faleh. When they visited the job, and they visited us repeatedly, they were really talking to each other as friends. Khaled, Christophe, and laughing, talking, joking with each other, joking with us. And that kind of relationship transcended throughout the project, organization. And everybody said, these guys are aligned. Everybody needs to be aligned too, okay? So we need to fix organizations as well as we start to say we need a good project sponsor. Well, the project sponsor also needs some help. Secondly, I would like really to thank my beautiful panelists who attended with us here today, Ross, Ricardo, and Americo. Lovely. I took a lot of notes from your beautiful insight. And lastly, Dr. Saadi, thank you for being a great moderator as usual. I look forward to seeing you in Bahrain in a couple of weeks. I want to thank our beautiful audience. Please, thank you for attending. We hope that you have benefited. And by the way, we are continuing. We have ongoing webinars every 2 weeks almost. So the next one, if you give me a minute, is going to be on the 12th of February. PMO governance by Bayhas Al Suwaidi. And the next one and the next one. Monitor us, check what's going on. Every 2 weeks, we have webinars of different subjects, different qualities. And hopefully we can hear from you. Please give us your feedback on what topics you'd like us to address. And thank you for attending with us. Thank you, Dr. Saad.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay safe.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Stay well and safe.
Bye-bye.
As-salam, everyone. Have a good evening. As-salam.
As-salam.